and I'm not responsible,
Okay.
and I have no reason to attack someone for no reason.
The year is 2024, and the setting is the United Kingdom. This is the story of Amy Louise Gray, a woman who had just turned 34 that fateful May. Amy grew up breathing the salty air of Poole, a sleepy coastal town in southern England, raised alongside her brothers by her mother, Sharon. The family remembers her as a firecracker, full of warmth, and possessed of a laugh so genuine it made everyone else smile. Her mother, Sharon, described her as a true force of nature, funny, kind, and endlessly energetic. Fresh out of school, she launched her career working at Barclays Bank. That era marked a beautiful turning point in her life. She met a woman named Sion, and the connection was instant. They married, put down roots in a modest suburb near Amy's hometown, and celebrated the arrival of their baby girl. Everyone in her orbit described Amy as the definition of a devoted partner and a doting mother. Since childhood, she lived for athletics. Even with the juggling act of a career in parenthood, she never lost that fire, carving out time to volunteer as a coach for local women's football squads. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. She even took home an award for her efforts. By early 2024, loved ones recall Amy being in a great place, genuinely joyful and excited about the road ahead. She had built a solid life, and the future looked bright. But on May 24th, 2024, that bright future went dark. Enter Nasen Sadi. Born in 2003, he arrived on British soil at the age of 4. While his country of birth remains private, he was raised in a Buddhist household and spent his formative years navigating South London. School was a struggle for Nasen. He was branded a social outcast early on, displaying odd behaviors that made other kids steer clear rather than buddy up. He lived a lonely existence, no close mates, never a girlfriend, which fueled a crushing sense of inadequacy and rock-bottom self-worth. Crucially, there were no diagnosed mental health barriers blocking his social skills. Yet, inside the classroom, his attitude was a constant red flag. He voiced toxic opinions, specifically targeting the girls, arguing that women were biologically inferior to men and had no business in professions like law enforcement. These disturbing views took a sinister turn when he signed up for a criminology degree at the University of Greenwich. Peers watched as his academic interest in crime morphed into a morbid fixation. He constantly derailed classes with weird questions about self-defense loopholes in homicide cases and how long DNA evidence actually lasts. His default setting was always to empathize with the perpetrator. It wasn't just curiosity, it was an obsession that terrified those around him, and his dark hobbies didn't stop there. Students caught him watching gruesome, graphic videos right in the middle of lectures, which creeped everyone out and pushed him further to the fringes of the social circle. The rejection festered, turning into a deep-seated resentment for society in general, and a venomous hatred for women in particular. The biggest red flag waved when he point-blank asked his professor, "How can I get away with murder?" The teacher laughed it off, asking if he was planning a hit, never realizing how deadly serious the moment actually was. During that conversation, he kept pressing, drilling down into forensics, and asking exactly how DNA is collected and shared. He grilled them on police protocols, specifically the step-by-step methods detectives use to track and identify a killer. He needed to know if UK police forces talked to each other, swapping evidence across borders, and just how far he would need to run to evade capture for a major crime. Once he was done grilling his lecturer, Nasen took his studies home. He launched a private research project into criminal psychology, and in the weeks leading up to the attack, his browsing history went into overdrive. He studied the hurdles killers face when operating in strange towns, deciding that if he were to strike, it had to be miles away from his home base in Croydon, London. He also spent time figuring out if booking an Airbnb with cash or credit cards could leave a digital paper trail. As fate would have it, the pin dropped on Bournemouth, the very town Amy Gray called home. On May 16th, he booked a trip from the 21st to the 24th, splitting his stay between 2 hotels. By May 19th, 2024, he was already virtually stalking the area, mapping out CCTV blind spots at local hotels. This was pure reconnaissance, getting to know the killing ground before he even arrived. Nasen also had a dark fetish for blades. He amassed an arsenal of 6 knives, buying them from different online sellers to avoid flagging any systems. Armed with his maps and his blades, he left his home in South London and checked into a travelodge in Bournemouth on May 21st, switching to the Silverhow Hotel 2 days later. He spent his evenings pacing the Bournemouth promenade, physically checking the cameras to find the perfect dark corner for his deadly plan. He also mapped his getaway. After weighing his options, he settled on the Durley Chine stretch of the beach. During the trip, he took a break to watch a screening of The Strangers, Chapter 1. It is a horror flick about random, motiveless slaughter, a chilling preview of reality, mirroring his own hatred, isolation, and obsession with lethal violence. All these dark threads came together on May 24, 2024, in a moment that would shatter the town. That day, Amy and her friend Leanne Miles headed down to Durley Chine Beach. They sat on the sand, lost in conversation, and as the sun dipped and the moon took over, they lit a small fire to keep the chill away. It was a routine evening, just unwinding after a long work week. They had no idea they were about to become the targets of Nassen's sick fantasy and his urge to kill for no reason at all. At 10:40 at night, cameras caught Nassen slipping out of the Silverhow Hotel. He moved in the dead of night, hood up, dressed head to toe in black, including his shoes. It was a short, 5-minute march to the sands of Durley Chine. Once there, he prowled the beachfront, pacing the dimly lit path that runs along the coast. Between 11 minutes past 5 and 18 minutes past 11, he was spotted walking the beach, casting glances toward the warm glow of Amy and Leanne's fire. He drifted past the pair, only to circle back for a second glance, noting that the stretch of sand was completely deserted. The shadows offered him a clean getaway. Seizing the advantage of surprise, he crept onto the beach. This moment was the culmination of all his dark rehearsal. All his life, he felt invisible and marginalized, a man who had been pushed to the sidelines time and again. For Nassen, this was the turning point where he would finally seize control. Leaving the streetlights behind, he moved toward the glow of the fire, locking his sights on Leanne and Amy. He launched his ambush in total silence. It was violent and instantaneous. Leanne was the first target, taking multiple hits before she could even rise from the sand. Amy didn't hesitate. She sprang to her feet, showing incredible courage as she confronted the attacker, screaming at him to back off to save her friend. She managed to draw his focus away from Leanne, but the moment she realized the blade was turning toward her, she bolted. Nassen hunted her down across the beach, delivering 10 brutal strikes to her chest, shoulder, and arm. Her final, chilling scream pierced the night air, a sound that would stay with witnesses forever. Leanne was in bad shape, but while Nassen was distracted with Amy, she forced herself to scramble in the opposite direction, aiming for the promenade. She was desperate for aid, but once Nassen was done with Amy, he spun around and set his sights on catching Leanne. It played out like a scene from a slasher movie. They were both sprinting, but Leanne managed to keep just enough lead that his blade only grazed her back. He landed another 20 blows before she finally broke free of his range, but the damage was severe. A punctured lung left her gasping for air. Against all odds, she kept moving. Leanne's escape was nothing short of a miracle, driven by pure adrenaline and a refusal to die. By some stroke of luck, the blade missed every vital artery, but she was still critically injured and losing blood fast. First responders flooded the scene almost immediately. Medics worked frantically on Amy, but her wounds were too extensive. She was declared deceased right there on the sand. Leanne was blue lighted to the nearest trauma center to fight for her life, while Nassen took off running, disappearing into the shadows. He laid low in Bournemouth for the night, waiting until the following day to trek back to Cutton. By the time he returned, the knife and his disguise were gone, tossed away in locations that investigators would never locate. Nassen felt a sick sense of accomplishment. He spent the next day refreshing news feeds, convinced he had pulled off a masterstroke without leaving a trace. With one woman fighting for breath in the ICU and another in the morgue, the police escalated the file to top priority. Crime scene investigators combed the beach, gathering forensic samples and recording every witness account available. Security cameras provided the breakthrough, capturing a male figure, stalking the victims, and later fleeing the scene. The footage showed he had been prowling the beach for days. Investigators brought in experts in gait analysis to study the specific way the suspect walked. That distinctive stride helped them track him across grainy footage to a convenience store where he bought supplies using a debit card. That transaction gave them a name, and the store's high-definition cameras gave them a crystal-clear face. It was the smoking gun they needed. The manhunt wrapped up in just 4 days. At 20 past 7, on May 20th, 2024, armed units swooped on his mother's house in Cutton. The arrest was caught on visceral bodycam video. "Turn around! Walk backward! Toward the sound of my voice! Keep coming! Step into the open, now! Come out! On your knees! Get down! "Eyes on me! Don't you move! You are under arrest on suspicion of murder." He didn't even blink. Even with assault rifles trained on him, he remained eerily detached and silent. That stone-faced demeanor persisted in the interrogation room. Nassin claimed he had no motive, hoping a lack of clear reasoning would create enough doubt to clear him. But the detectives already had him dead to rights. They dug for a why, assuming there must be some hidden connection or logic behind the brutality. Nassin remained cocky, insisting that the clothes on the video were generic and that the case against him was purely circumstantial. He thought he was smarter than the room, but it was a losing battle. Simultaneously, forensics teams tore his mother's house apart looking for the blade or bloodied clothes. In his nightstand, officers found a knife. His grandfather pointed them to another blade stashed behind a wardrobe, but neither weapon matched the wounds on the victims. His mother eventually surrendered a cache of knives and even an axe that she had previously taken away from him. It was clear the man was obsessed with edged weapons, yet technically, none of these specific items tied him to the murder. He refused to unlock his phone, a tactical error he'd later rue. With Nassin stonewalling every question, the interview ground to a halt. Prosecutors formally charged him with the murder of Amy Gray and the attempted murder of Leanne Miles. Still convinced of his own genius, Nassin initially didn't even bother to hire a lawyer. Even when he finally got a legal team, he barely spoke to them, his silence serving as one last display of arrogant superiority. On June 4, 2024, he appeared via video feed. The judge set the plea hearing for August 23rd. He entered a plea of not guilty. The trial was slated for November 25th to run for 3 weeks, but the mountain of evidence was so crushing that the proceedings wrapped up in a mere 9 days. The prosecution painted a picture of a cold, calculated killer, arguing this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime but a plan months in the making. His digital footprint was damning, revealing search history with chilling questions like, why is it harder to catch a murderer if he strikes in a different town? He didn't stop there. He scoped out the nightlife patterns at Bournemouth Beach and even analyzed the ground itself, figuring out if sand or pebbles would be easier to run on. Even his education was used against him. As a criminology student, he had grilled his professors on DNA evidence and exactly how police departments share intel on homicide cases. State attorneys theorized that his violence stemmed from a deep-seated hatred of women, fueled by a history of rejection and a bruised ego. Witnesses described a man sitting on a powder keg of repressed anger, eventually exploding into a vicious assault for absolutely no reason. The sheer brutality of the knife wounds left no room for doubt he intended to end a life that night. He cockily told cops they'd never crack his phone password, but detectives outsmarted him by tracking his data, proving he was glued to the news coverage right after the attack. There was one creepy detail the jury didn't hear, but it speaks volumes about his desperate hunger for fame. While locked up at Belmar Prison, awaiting trial, he cornered a female guard, asking if she'd heard about the Bournemouth Beach slang and what the press was saying. He wanted to know if it was making headlines, then proceeded to gratify himself right in front of her, proof that he just wanted notoriety. He craved the spotlight, but also thought he was smart enough to walk free, while his lawyers tried to lean on his lack of a criminal record to call this a one-off incident. They pulled the textbook defense strategy, suggesting he was on the autism spectrum and that social awkwardness somehow explained the violence. But that play fell flat since there was zero medical proof, no diagnosis before jail, none after, and the judge wasn't buying it as an excuse for brutality. The story Nassin tried to sell was that he'd merely traveled down to Bournemouth for a solo getaway, claiming he walked the promenade at night to avoid birds and that the stabbing was just a random freak occurrence. After stonewalling initially, he eventually confessed to a psychiatrist, claiming he was ready to get help and turn his life around. His team tried to spin that as remorse, but nobody in that courtroom was fooled. It was obvious he didn't give a damn about Amy or Leanne, and the jury saw him for exactly what he was. Justice finally landed on March 28, 2025, when he was handed a life sentence with a minimum of 39 years behind bars. For the UK, nearly 4 decades is a massive sentence, and the judge made it clear his cocky attitude and refusal to unlock his phone definitely bumped up the time. Closing the book on him, the judge called his actions cold, calculated, and fueled by a sick obsession with hurting people. That verdict finally closed a dark chapter for the town, while Amy Gray's family spoke through their grief, honoring a bright, loving soul taken way before her time. To say their goodbyes, loved ones met on the sands of Bournemouth Beach as the sun went down. As dusk settled, her wife Shan and their daughter tossed rose petals into the waves, a beautiful, heartbreaking final send-off. Sean said the stunning view would always be a reminder of Amy's beauty, while Amy's mom, Sharon, opened up about the massive hole left in their family. She admitted their hearts are permanently shattered and that nothing will ever feel normal again. Even her football club posted a moving tribute video called Our Coach, Our Friend, highlighting the joy she brought. Amy's legacy is set in stone, while Nason is destined to fade into nothingness.